In this video, I'll take you through the process of creating a very simple customizable welcome sign. We will do this in 4 easy steps. We'll create a job and a simple vector profile of the sign in our Vectric software. We'll have a browse through the Design&Make store for a piece of CNC ready Clipart to add to it. Import in the Clipart and add a bit of customizable text that we'll VCarve. And then lastly, we'll develop a set of toolpaths so we can cut it on our CNC. For this project, we'll use VCarveDesktop, but keep in mind what we'll be doing in our software can be done in VCarvePro and Inspire. So here we have a new instance of our software, and we're going to create a brand new file. It's going to be a single-sided job. We're going to make the width of our job size 8 inches. Now this is bigger than our final project size to give us some wiggle room around the outside edge for all of our profile cuts we need to do. So it's going to be 8 by 13, and we're going to make this 0.75 inches thick. So that's our material thickness we're going to use. We're going to zero off our material surface. Our datum for right now will be set to the center, but when we go to develop our tooling, we're going to move it to our bottom left. Make sure that we have a modeling resolution set to very high. That's important because we will be using 3D content in this. And our material settings, well, we'll just go with light oak for now because I think that's what we're going to end up cutting this in the end. So we can go ahead and just click OK. Now the first thing we're going to need to do is to set up a vector for the outside shape of our sign or our profile vector. So in that case, we're going to create a rectangle. We're going to make sure that our anchor point is in the center and that the XY is 0, 0. That way it'll start the vector from the center of our job space. We're going to use radius external corners, and they're going to be about 1/2 inch. The width of this vector or profile vector is going to be 6 by 12, and so we can just go ahead and create that. And there we have it. So let's close that down. That's going to be a nice shape for our sign, but what we're going to want to do now is to put aside some space on this sign for the model that we are going to go and get from Design&Make. I know already that I think it's going to be a round shape, so let's go ahead and create a circle. And I think that the space that we're going to kind of allot for this needs to be less than 6 inches across, obviously. So 4 1/4 will be totally fine for this, and we can set these both to 0 for now. And we can just say create. We'll close that down. Now let's select that vector we just created, and using our cursor keys on our keyboard, we can just move that down in the approximate location that we want that relief or that model to be cut. And that looks great right where it is right there. The next thing we should do is maybe lay out our text for our sign. So the house number for this that we're going to put this sign on is 123 Rose House Main Street. Rose House being the name of the house. So let's just go ahead and add some text. It's going to be 123 Rose House Main Street. Great. And then we're going to go ahead and choose the font, and I think I like that font just as it is. That's fine for right now. Doesn't need to be bold, doesn't need to be italics. It's been centered, so you can see that the justification is centered for this. The text type is fine. We're going to size it up once we get everything taken care of, and we can just go ahead and close that down. And let's grab that by the center handle, and we're going to move it to the center of the space that I think the text needs to be on our sign. Now I like to have the 123 larger than the Rose House, and I think we can size Main Street up a little bit as well. But in order to do that, I'm going to need to break apart this text into single lines. So let's right click on that, and we're going to break the text block into lines. And now you'll see I have 3 different lines here of text. Now I can independently select these and hold down my shift key and use this control handle, and I can size that up to what I need. That seems pretty nice right there, maybe a little bit bigger. That looks fine. Rose House is a good size, and I think I want to bring Main Street up just a little bit bigger. That's good. Maybe just nudge that down a little bit for our spacing. And then we can group select all of those and just kind of move them down into place where I think I'd like them to be. And that looks really good. So there we have it. I think that's a great start for our layout of our house sign. Now that we have the project file set up and the profile of the sign drawn, let's head over to the Design&Make store and find a single piece of content to be added to it. So here we are at store.designandmake.com. First thing you're going to want to do is log into our verified account. Put in my email address, my password, and I'll go ahead and sign in. And again, you know that I'm signed in because you see up in the corner here it says Hi Todd. Let's go back to our Design&Make homepage just by clicking the Design&Make logo at the top. And that way we have the choice now to navigate to either our model project section or our individual models. For us, we only want one model, so let's go ahead and have a look at our individual models. And I can have a look down through all of the different content categories that we have here, but they may not net what we would like to actually use for our sign. In this case, it doesn't. So I could go ahead and refine my selection by choosing some different things over here. For instance, plant life, since I'm looking for a rose, or I can just go to the top here and type into search all products for rose. In this case, that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to go ahead and press go. And now, because I've searched all products, I'm going to get a mixed results search here. So there could be some model projects in here along with single models. There's all kinds of nice roses and rosettes here for me to choose from. And actually the one that I'd like to use is this first rosette number 8, which looks a lot like a tutor rose. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I can take a closer look at the A style to see if it maybe is what I need. But for me, what I want to do is I want to cut this below the surface of my material. So the B style and a nice smooth dish is probably a better option for me. And that's great right there. So we're going to go ahead and click outside of this. And I'll add the B style to my cart. And then I can go ahead now and check out. And once I've paid for my component, then I can go ahead and log into my Design&Make account and download it. In a second, we'll jump back into our Vectric software and continue with our layout. I'm going to show you how easy it is to import in that piece of Clipart that we just downloaded. Please keep in mind that there are several different ways to organize and import in your single models into your software. If you're interested in exploring more of those options, please refer to our video called Installing and Locating Your Design&Make Clipart. Okay, now that I've purchased and downloaded my piece of content that I'd like to use in my project, I'll need to get it into our software. So let's go over to our Modeling tab, and we're going to import in some 3D content. And what we'll need to do is navigate over to our Downloads folder. And the last thing that I downloaded was this model right here, 57516_b.v3m. You'll note that I've downloaded a v3m file. That's because I'll be using this content in Vectric Software. And if you have Vectric Software that can use Design&Make content, then that's the file format that you're going to want to select. So let's choose that, and then we'll click Open. Now right away, you'll see that our 3D content can be seen in the 2D view. If we go ahead and tile our views, you'll see that it's also in the 3D view, which is great. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move this content to where we need it to be on our job. So let's go ahead and drag it down to the midpoint of that circle that we originally drawn, and we'll size that down. Now that I have my content into the software, I can make size adjustments. Right now, I think it's a bit too small for this area. There's a bit of area here that tapers down into the bottom of the dish, and that's going to minimize the actual diameter or the size of the relief that's inside of that. So let's hold down my Shift key. I'm just going to grab that control handle and just size it up a little bit to make it a little bit bigger. I think that's going to look much better now. I don't need this vector anymore because that was just there for reference. Let's delete that out of there. The next thing we're going to want to do is to choose a shape height that will give us the best dimension that we can have for this component within our material thickness. So by choosing this component, we can go up here to our component properties. We'll click on that. And we can change our shape height here. Now I know that my material thickness is 3/4 of an inch. So as long as it's less than that, then I'll be okay. I don't want it to be too close to 0.75 because I don't want it to get too thin on the back. So let's go with 1/4 inch to start out with. That looks pretty good like that. We could probably go a little bit farther than that. Let's go with 0.35 of an inch. I think that looks much better. I'm just going to go ahead and close that down. Now the next thing we're going to want to do, and this is a best practice thing in the software, is to add in a zero plane. That's because we're cutting with inside of a dish, and it's just a good thing to have in there to protect the material outside of it. So we're going to go ahead and click that. And you'll see that now in our 3D view, we have representation of our material surface here, and our dish is actually cut into that, and that looks really good. Looks really quite nice. That's perfect. Now the next thing we're going to do is start to develop some really basic tooling for this job. So let's go ahead and look at our toolpaths tab, and we'll pin that in place. Retile our views so we can see both views nice and clear, and we'll start off by setting our material setup here. So again, our material thickness is 3/4 of an inch. We know that. Our datum is set to the center, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it down to the bottom left because that's the way I prefer to cut my stuff on my machine. We're going to zero off our material surface. We're going to make sure that our model is right at the very top of our material.
And our Z-gaps and our start position are safe and appropriate for our machine here in the labs. Now, please keep in mind that any of the tooling that we're going to create here, I've set up to be safe and appropriate for my machine. You're going to make sure that you look over this, review it all, and make sure that it's safe and appropriate for your machine as well, based on the material, the tools you have, and also the comfort level with your machine. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is do a roughing pass on the Tudor rows area. In order to do that, I need to have a profile vector. So I'm going to go ahead and select that piece of content. I'm going to go up here and choose to create a vector boundary around selected components. You see I have a nice vector boundary here now. I can select that and I can go into my roughing pass. So I'm going to use an end mill for this, a 1/4 inch end mill to be specific. I'm going to use a selected vector to isolate my tooling. That's that vector right here we have. I'm going to have it no boundary offset because I don't want to go outside that circle. I want to stay just inside that circle. I'm going to leave a little bit of material behind for my finishing pass. I'm going to use Z-level roughing in this particular case. The raster angle is fine at 0. I don't want to do any ramp or plunge moves, and we're just going to rename this to 3D roughing, and we can go ahead and calculate that. Now, as always, we're going to want to preview our visible tool paths and make sure that we get what we expect, and that's exactly what I expected to happen. We're going to be removing a lot of this material here, so I don't need to worry about removing that with my finishing bit. And we'll close that down. The next toolpath we're going to want to make is a finishing toolpath. Let's choose that. We're going to use a tapered ball nose end mill for this. If I wanted to change that, I could just go ahead and reselect a new tool, but for right now, that's perfectly fine. We're going to use that selected vector that we have over here in our 2D view. We're going to have 0 boundary offset because, again, it's inside of a dish. I don't want to go outside that. We're going to use a offset tooling strategy. That's because it's in a circle, so I can work my way out from the center. And if there's any machining lines left behind, they'll be radius, or they'll be in a circle, and they'll look like they fit the actual pattern that I'm trying to create here. And that all looks great, and we're going to go ahead and create a finishing pass, and we'll calculate that. Again, let's preview our visible tool paths. And that's going to look perfect on there. That's great. Perfect amount of detail for the material that I'm going to be using. Wonderful. Let's close this down. The next thing we're going to want to do is our V-carving. So let's go ahead and select all of our text and choose to use the V-carving toolpath operation here. We're going to have a slight start depth, but I want to use a flat bottom. These are quite wide, so I want to make sure that I don't cut through my material. The chances are I won't, but I just want to be sure. But also I like the look of a bit of a flat bottom in these wider numbers. So let's go ahead and give it a flat depth of, let's say 0.125 of an inch. We're going to use a 60-degree V-bit. We're not going to need to worry about anything here. We don't want to project this onto a 3D component, and we'll just call this VCarve. And we'll go ahead now and choose to calculate that. Preview our visible toolpath. And that's what we're going to have in the end. And that looks great, I think. Just what I expected to see. Let's close this down. And the last thing we're going to want to do is to actually create a profile cut around the outside of our sign. So let's select this vector, and we're going to choose the profile toolpath operation. We're going to start at 0. We're going to cut down the thickness of our material that we know to be 0.75, but in this case I'm going to use a software variable. If I put in Z, then automatically the software will take our material thickness when we set up our job and put that in there, and we're going to add to that 0.02 of an inch. I'm going to cut a little bit deeper into my spoil board. That way I'll make sure I cut all the way through my job. I'm going to use that 1/4 inch end mill, and that's great. I'm going to cut outside that vector, which is perfect. I'm not going to bother to use a separate last pass. I am going to ramp in my tool pass. This is a great little thing for you to consider. That way you'll put a little less load on your tool as it works down through these different profile cuts here. And we're not going to project it onto a 3D component, but we are going to go back up here and add in some tabs. So let's add in a tab. Let's go ahead and create these at 3/4 of an inch wide by, let's say, 0.1 of an inch thick. We're going to edit our tabs. Now we can go ahead and place those just by clicking into our 2D view here, where we'd like those tabs to be. Put them somewhere that makes sense, flat areas that are easy to sand off. Let's just close that down now that those are in there. And now we can go ahead and quickly calculate that cutout pass. We'll calculate that. It's telling us that we're going to cut through our material, but that's okay. We'll just click OK. Let's preview our visible tool paths. And there we have it. Those tabs will hold that into place for me. Can pop that material off my machine once it's all done and cut those tabs and sand down the edges and apply a finish. I think that's going to be a nice looking house sign for outside of a house.
Well, there we have it. All there is now is to save off our toolbars and send them off to our CNC. It's that easy to get started with Design&Make and our CNC ready clip art with your Vectric software. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter to keep on top of what's happening at Design&Make, or follow us socially on your favorite platform.